Hi guys, and welcome to Relaxation Bedtime History. Tonight we step into a frosty night in a medieval keep in the year 1296, where the stones are cold enough to make your bones reconsider their life choices. The candles tremble in every draught, and the promise of a warm bed feels less like comfort and more like a minor miracle. Outside, the snow lies blue under the moon. Inside, smoke curls beneath blackened rafters, dogs sigh near the fire, and somewhere, someone is definitely pretending not to notice the smell of damp wool. You probably won't survive this night with modern expectations intact, but you may survive it with a better appreciation for blankets. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me where you are listening from, and what your local time is. Now, dim the lights. You trudge forward through the dark, your boots pressing into a hard skin of snow that has formed over the road. It cracks softly under your weight, then gives way to mud below. Because medieval winter likes to keep its little surprises, the wind moves over the open ground and finds every loose seam in your clothing. It slips under your cloak, climbs your sleeves, and touches the back of your neck with the cold. Personal confidence of a debt collector. Ahead of you rises the keep. It is not the fairy tale castle of painted storybooks, all graceful towers and shining banners. It is heavier than that, squatter, sterner, built to endure rather than charm in the dim light. The keep looks almost grown out of the earth, a mass of stone with narrow openings and a crown of battlements. The walls are pale where frost has settled on them, and darker where smoke from braziers and chimney holes has stained the stone over many winters. It stands as a promise and a warning. Come in. It seems to say, and be warmer, try anything foolish, and become part of the scenery. The year is 1296, and across much of medieval Europe, stone keeps still matter deeply, though their design is changing. Fortifications are becoming more complex, with curtain walls, gatehouses, towers, and layered defences. But a keep remains the heart of many castles, a last refuge, a storehouse, a symbol of lordly power, and on a night like this, a very large stone argument against freezing to death. That is your mainstream historical fact for the evening. Tuck gently into your cloak like a useful hand warmer. You pull the hood closer around your face and keep walking. The road to the gate is not silent. Snow softens the world, but it does not erase it. You hear the creak of leather straps, the faint clink of metal fittings, the muffled cough of a mule somewhere behind you, and the distant bark of a dog inside the walls. Smoke drifts toward you, low and bitter, smelling of damp wood, peat, old ash, and something meaty from the kitchens. It is not a clean smell, not exactly. It is the smell of survival being cooked slowly in a room with poor ventilation. To your right, the ditch or moat lies dark beneath a crust of ice. It may not be full of dramatic, glimmering water tonight. It may be half frozen, half slush, edged with reeds and unpleasant secrets. Some castle ditches were dry, some wet, and some shifted with local conditions, budgets, and the optimistic lies of whoever described them later. Historians still argue whether many smaller defensive ditches were meant primarily as true military obstacles, drainage features, statements of authority, or all three at once, which is a very historian way of saying, yes, probably, but please let us write 6 more books about it. The gatehouse grows larger. A torch burns above it in an iron bracket, its flame blown flat by the wind. The light moves across the arch and makes the stone seem alive. You see the portcullis raised, its lower spikes hanging overhead like the teeth of some tired beast. Beyond it, a heavy wooden gate waits open just enough for controlled passage, not welcoming, not unfriendly, merely practical, which is the medieval version of customer service. A guard steps forward, He is wrapped in wool and leather, with a hood pulled low and a spear angled comfortably in one hand. His breath comes out in pale clouds. He looks you over, not cruelly, just with the exhausted suspicion of a man whose job is to stand outside in weather that makes soup seem philosophical. His cheeks are red with cold. His gloves are probably not as warm as he would like. Nobody's gloves are as warm as they would like. This is one of the hidden laws of the Middle Ages. You give your name, or the name you're expected to give. Perhaps you're a guest attached to a noble household, perhaps a messenger, perhaps a dependent of the estate, perhaps simply someone fortunate enough to be allowed in before the night deepens. In 1296, who you are matters at every doorway. Rank is not just about pride. It decides where you sleep, what you eat, whether you sit near the fire, and whether anyone notices if you're shivering. The guard grunts and waves you onward. Under the arch, the cold changes. It does not vanish. No, let us not become too ambitious, but it folds inward. The wind drops, sound thickens, your footsteps echo against stone, above you. There may be murder holes, though perhaps not as theatrical as modern imagination likes to pretend. Some gate passages did include openings for defenders to attack intruders from above, but the popular image of every castle enthusiastically pouring boiling oil is a bit overcooked. Oil was expensive, water, stones, sand, and whatever else could be dropped without bankrupting the household were more likely candidates. Medieval people were practical, grim, occasionally, but practical. And here is your quirky little tidbit, carried carefully like a candle in both hands in some medieval households. Rushes and straw used on floors could be mixed with fragrant herbs such as lavender, meadowsweet, or a sweet flag to sweeten the air. This sounds charming until you remember what they were sweetening it from. Mud, smoke, dogs, grease, spilled ale, wet boots, and humans who believed bathing was useful but didn't always have convenient access to warm water. So yes, perhaps a sprinkle of herbs, medieval air freshener, if you're feeling generous. You emerge from the gate passage into the outer space of the castle, but only briefly, because tonight we are still following the first threshold, the moment of arrival, the crossing from open winter into guarded warmth. Behind you, the road fades into darkness. Ahead, the life of the keep glows in pieces. A lantern swings. A servant hurries past carrying something covered in cloth. A horse stamps in a nearby stable, sending a dull thud through the yard. Somewhere above, a shutter knocks once. Then again, like a sleepy warning. You pause and let your body understand the difference. Outside, winter owns everything. Inside, people are trying to negotiate. They have walls, fires, stores of grain, salted meat, wool blankets, locks, customs, prayers, and routines. None of these defeat winter. They bargain with it. They say, not tonight, if we are careful, not this room, if the fire holds, not this child, if the broth stretches far enough, not this traveller, if the gate opens in time. The keep stones hold the cold, but they also hold memory. Hands have lifted these stones, shaped them, mortared them, cursed them, paid for them, defended them, and leaned against them after long days. A castle is never just a military machine. It is also a workplace, a pantry, a court, a landlord's office, a shelter, a stage, and, for many people, a very uncomfortable home tonight. As frost gathers along the edges of wooden beams and candle flames flutter in hidden draughts, you're entering not only a building but a whole system of living. You pass beneath another shadowed arch and feel the snow on your cloak beginning to melt. The damp seeps through the outer wool, cool at first, then strangely intimate. A boy with a lantern looks at you, curious and sleepy. then remembers himself and looks away. His light catches the ground, where snow has been trampled into brown slush. The smell of animals thickens, hay, manure, leather, warm breath. Not poetic, perhaps, but honest. History is often less polished than the museum label suggests. A bell sounds somewhere within the enclosure. Low and dull, not a grand cathedral bell, not a dramatic signal in a film score, more like a practical reminder, a sound to mark routine, a sound to gather bodies, close doors, check fires, bring in tools, count animals, secure what must not be lost. You look back once. The gate behind you is being pushed wider for another arrival, then drawn inward again. Wood groans against iron, chains shift. The guard speaks to someone in a low voice. The world outside narrows to a strip of night for a moment. The keep feels like a ship in a frozen sea, creaking, smoking, crowded, and impossibly precious. And you, wrapped in wool, carrying the cold on your shoulders, step farther in. The path bends toward the working yard, where the outer ward waits with its stables, stores, guards, animals, and frozen mud. All the busy machinery of survival turning quietly under the winter stars. You move from the gate into the outer ward, and the first thing you notice is that a castle does not sleep, simply because the sky has gone dark. It settles. Yes, it lowers its voice, but it does not sleep. Not fully. The place breathes around you in little clouds of steam, smoke, animal warmth, and human worry, all trapped between walls that keep out danger while also keeping in every smell known to the medieval imagination. The yard underfoot is a mixture of frozen mud, old straw, trampled snow, and the occasional hidden puddle waiting to ruin your confidence. Each step makes a different sound. Crunch, squish, crack, a delicate winter symphony. If the composer had been a tired groom with wet socks, your boots slide once, and you catch yourself on a rough post near a stable door. The wood is cold and splintered beneath your glove. Somewhere inside the stable, a horse blows air through its nostrils with the soft, impatient judgment of an animal that has seen many humans make poor choices. The outer ward is the castle's working skin. It is where the keep's grand promise of safety becomes practical labour. Stables line one side of the yard, their low doors half covered by hanging sacking to keep out drafts. A storehouse squats nearby, shut tight with iron fittings, because grain is not merely food in winter, it is wealth. It is rent. It is bargaining power. It is the difference between a household that endures and a household that starts making very nervous eye contact with the last sack of oats. In 1296, many castles are not just military strongholds, but centres of estate administration. Rents are collected, grain is stored, livestock is counted, repairs are ordered, disputes are heard, and supplies are managed from places like this. That is the solid historical fact beneath your feet tonight. The Lord's power does not only live in armour and banners, it lives in barrels, ledgers, locked chests, and the dull, patient arithmetic of survival. A groom appears at the stable entrance, shoulders bent against the cold, carrying a forkful of hay. He is not romantic. He is not posing for a tapestry. He's simply trying to keep valuable animals alive until morning. His breath smokes in the lantern light. Bits of straw cling to his sleeves. He mutters to one horse, then another. Using the familiar low tones people reserve for creatures they depend on and occasionally resent. Horses need feed, shelter, shoeing, grooming, and care. They also produce a great deal of manure. Because no historical period can be understood properly until someone admits the scale of the manure. A cart stands near the wall, its wheels crusted with ice. The iron rims have caught the cold and hold it fiercely. Beside it, 2 hens complain from a wicker cage, their feathers puffed like tiny offended nobles. Chickens, geese, pigs, dogs, cats, horses, oxen, maybe a cow or 2, depending on the site and season, all belong to the living machinery of the castle. Some are food, some are transport, some are pest control, some are status, and some, like the dogs slinking hopefully toward the kitchen smells, are expert emotional manipulators. You pass a low shed where firewood is stacked in careful rows. Not enough. You think at once. There is never enough firewood in winter, even in a well-supplied household. Fuel must be managed. Wood has to be cut, carted, dried, split, stored, and guarded from damp in some regions. Peat, charcoal, or brushwood may supplement it. A fire in the hall feels comforting. But before that comfort comes aching backs, frozen hands, and someone being told to fetch more logs when they have only just sat down. A guard crosses the yard with a lantern and a cloak patched at the hem. He pauses near a postern door, checks the latch, then lifts the light toward the wall walk above. Another figure answers with a small movement. The exchange is quiet, practiced. There is no dramatic shout into the night, no heroic trumpet, just routine, and routine is what keeps people alive. Doors checked, animals secured, tools brought in, fires watched, watchmen rotated, food stores locked. The boring details, honestly, are doing most of the work here. Near the storehouse, you see sacks piled beneath a canvas cover, grain, perhaps oats or barley, and maybe dried peas or beans. Salted fish could be packed in barrels. Ale might be stored in casks. Cheese, hard and durable, waits in cool corners in a winter household. Food is not an abstract comfort. It is scheduled, counted, stretched, preserved. A castle may look mighty from the road, but inside it is always asking the same question. How long can we last if the weather worsens? The roads close, or the neighbours become unpleasant. And neighbours do become unpleasant. This is the 1290s, after all, in the British Isles. 1296 is a year of sharp conflict, especially remembered for Edward the Warren's campaign in Scotland and the removal of the Stone of Scone after English forces took it from the Scots. You do not need the whole political storm tonight, not yet, but it lingers outside the walls like colder weather. Castles are homes, yes, but they are homes built in a world where authority is contested and armed men sometimes arrive before breakfast. Very rude, but historically common. A small figure darts past you, carrying a bundle of kindling nearly as wide as his chest. A boy, perhaps a servant or stable lad. His shoes are poor. His nose is running. He's moving fast because stillness in this cold is punishment. He glances at you and vanishes behind a kitchen outbuilding, leaving behind the smell of smoke and wet wool. Here is a quirky little tidbit to tuck beside the frozen hens. Some medieval estate accounts record astonishingly specific purchases and repairs, including things like locks, hinges, nails, candles, fish, spices, and even payments for catching pests. The grand romance of castle life often survives in poetry, but the daily reality survives in receipts. Nothing says medieval atmosphere quite like a clerk noting the cost of replacing a broken door fitting while everyone else is trying not to freeze. Historians still debate how far the surviving records reflect ordinary daily life, rather than exceptional moments when someone unusually literate, wealthy, or bureaucratic happened to write things down. That matters, because the people you pass in this yard, the groom, the boy with kindling, the guard checking latches, may leave hardly any direct words behind. Their lives appear in hints, a wage, a ration, a tool, a scolding in a court roll, a name, if luck is generous, and yet tonight you feel them vividly, because a working castle cannot exist without them. The outer ward narrows near a row of service buildings. The snow here is churned into a dark paste by many feet. You smell the kitchen more clearly now. Onion, leek, smoke, fat. Something salted, something grainy and warm. Your stomach reacts before your dignity can stop it. It gives a low little complaint. Very fair. You have been walking through winter and medieval hospitality, while unequal and rule-bound, knows that a cold traveller is a fragile object. A woman carrying a covered bowl passes close enough for you to feel the warmth rising from it. Her sleeves are rolled under a rough outer wrap. Her hands are red, cracked, and quick. She does not stop. There is work to finish before the hall can fully settle for the night. Behind her, another servant hauls water in a wooden bucket, its surface skinning over at the edges with thin ice. Water has weight. We forget that sometimes. Every cup, every pot, every wash. Every animal's drink must come from somewhere, often carried by someone whose shoulders remember each trip. You look upward at the keep again. Its upper windows are narrow, some shuttered, some glowing faintly. The warmer rooms are above, or deeper within, depending on layout and status. The yard remains a place of movement and necessity. It is the buffer between danger and domestic life. Between the winter road and the firelit hall, it is also a reminder that comfort is never separate from labour. Someone fed the horses, someone stacked the wood, someone checked the door, someone made the broth that is now making your stomach compose poetry. The wind slips down from the wall and scatters loose straw across the yard. A dog noses at it, decides it is not food, and trots away with philosophical disappointment. You follow the path toward the great hall, guided by voices, smoke, and the glow spilling from a doorway ahead. The yard recedes behind you, still busy, still watchful, still holding the cold at bay with muscle, habit, and locked timber. The doorway opens, heat rolls out, smoky and human and imperfect, but unmistakably heat. You step closer, leaving the animals, stores, guards, and frozen mud behind, and the murmur of the hall rises to meet you. You step into the great hall, and for one blessed moment, the cold releases its grip. Not completely, of course. Let us not get carried away. This is still a stone building in winter, not a spa retreat with herbal tea and suspiciously soft towels. But the air here has weight and warmth. It presses against your face with smoke, breath, steam, and the deep orange glow of the central fire. Your frozen fingers begin to sting as feeling creeps back into them. Which is always how warmth announces itself after a hard cold, not gently, more like a tiny army with needles. The hall stretches before you, long and high, with dark rafters above and walls that catch the firelight in uneven patches. Shadows climb the stone and timber. They shiver whenever the flames shift. The floor is strewn with rushes, not a soft carpet exactly, more a practical covering to absorb spills, soften footsteps, and disguise the fact that many humans, dogs, boots, and food scraps have shared this space all day. Somewhere in the rushes, old herbs release a faint sweetness when crushed underfoot, fighting bravely against smoke, grease, damp wool, and the bold contributions of dogs. At the centre, the hearth burns low and broad in some halls. The fire sits directly on the floor, with smoke rising toward a louver or vent in the roof. Chimneys exist in medieval Europe by this period, especially in higher status buildings. But not every hall enjoys the same luxury or efficiency, so you get warmth and smoke together. A 2-for-1 arrangement that no modern guest would request, but everyone here accepts with the resignation of people who enjoy being alive. This is the household's public heart. Meals are taken here, announcements made, disputes heard, guests received, servants directed, and status performed in ways both obvious and quiet. The Lord's table, or high table, stands at the upper end of the hall, raised or set apart, where rank gathers nearer the best food, better light, and more visible honour. Lower tables or trestles run below, crowded with retainers, servants, visitors, and dependents according to position. Medieval dining is not only about eating, it is about knowing where you belong. And you, very wisely, do not wander toward the high table as if you have discovered open seating at a friendly tavern. Seating has meaning, placement has meaning, even the distance from the fire may reveal favour, duty, or usefulness. A household in 1296 is a web of obligation, not a casual dinner party. Nobody here has printed name cards, but everyone knows the invisible ones. A servant directs you toward a place along a side bench. The bench is hard, polished by use, and cold where no one has been sitting. You settle down carefully, your cloak still damp at the shoulders. The person beside you shifts to make room without quite looking at you, on your other side. A dog rests its chin on someone's shoe and watches the room with the deep patience of a creature who understands that humans drop food. The sound of the hall surrounds you. Wooden bowls scrape, cups knock against boards. A man laughs, then coughs smoke from his throat. A child is hushed. A servant calls softly for someone to move a platter. The fire pops, sending up a brief whirl of sparks. Boots shuffle through rushes, somewhere near the lower end. Two dogs have a very serious disagreement over a bone that is mostly memory. The quarrel ends quickly when a cook's assistant snaps at them and one retreats with wounded dignity. On the walls, you may see hangings, perhaps not the grand tapestries of later imagination in every room, but woven cloths, painted panels, shields, or simple coverings that help soften drafts and announce wealth in colder seasons. Textiles are not mere decoration. They keep warmth near the body and make stone feel less like a punishment. A fine wall hanging says, "Yes, this family has resources." It also says, "Yes, this wall is freezing, and we're all pretending with elegance." Here is your mainstream historical fact for this section. Glowing gently beside the hearth, the Great Hall was a central feature of many medieval elite households, used for dining, ceremony, administration, hospitality, and the daily display of hierarchy. It was not merely a dining room, it was the social engine of the house, where power became visible in benches, cups, portions, voices, and the right to be noticed. You watch the high end of the hall. The Lord may not be present yet, or perhaps he sits there already, speaking with a steward or guest, his cloak better lined, his cup better made, his bread perhaps finer. Near him are people whose lives orbit his authority, family members, knights, clerks, trusted officers. The steward matters greatly here, maybe more than a visitor first realizes. He helps manage the household's flow, the food, the service, the order, if the Lord is the symbol. The steward is often the person quietly making sure the symbol is fed on time. Historians still argue whether the medieval Great Hall should be understood mainly as a communal domestic space, a political stage, or an administrative workplace, because of course it is all three. But the balance changes by region, rank, and century. Tonight, as you sit among the benches, you feel how inseparable those functions are. The hall warms you, feeds you, ranks you, watches you, and teaches you where you stand. All before the soup is even fully ladled. A servant comes by with a jug of ale. The smell is yeasty, sour, comforting. Ale is safer and more common than the usual modern joke suggests. Though water was also drunk when clean sources were available, medieval people were not permanently terrified of water like cats in moral crisis. But ale, especially small ale with low alcohol content, is nourishing, familiar, and practical. The cup passes to you. It is cool at the rim, rough in the hand, and you drink because the warmth of the hall has reminded your body that it is thirsty. Near the fire, a few favoured hounds lounge with shameless confidence. These are not random strays, elite households, prized hunting dogs, and some were treated with remarkable care, a quirky little tidbit. Soft as a paw against the rushes is that medieval texts sometimes describe specialised dog keepers, treatments for canine ailments, and even affectionate concern for valuable hounds. So yes, a noble hunting dog might receive better attention than many tired humans in the lower reaches of society. Please do not think about that too hard while the dog by your foot looks deeply comfortable. The hall's warmth is uneven. One cheek faces the fire and begins to thaw. Your back remains aware of every draught sliding through doors and shutters. Smoke hangs above in a dim layer, making the rafters vanish and reappear like a dream. Candle flames flicker along the walls and tables, but the fire is the main presence, the glowing heart that everyone faces even when they pretend not to. A young page moves past with careful steps, carrying a small dish. His expression is solemn with responsibility. He is learning service, discipline, rank, and probably how not to trip in front of terrifying adults. Across from you. An older servant tears bread with strong fingers. A woman at the far side leans close to hear another over the murmur at the lower end. Someone begins a quiet song, not loudly enough to command the room, just enough to thread through it. You begin to understand that the hall is crowded not only with bodies but with relationships. Every nod, every portion, every place at the board carries meaning. Who serves and who is served, who speaks freely and who waits, who sits near light and who sits in shadow. And yet, beneath all that order, everyone shares the same winter pressing against the walls. Even the Lord must sleep in a cold world. Even the finest cloak smells of smoke eventually. Medieval hierarchy is powerful, yes, but smoke is more democratic than anyone would like. The meal begins to gather itself in earnest. Bread appears, bowls are set down, steam rises from pottage, thick and humble. Salted things wait on platters, the dogs notice. Naturally, because dogs have always understood history at floor level, your hands curve around your cup, your damp cloak loosens at your shoulders. Outside, beyond the gate and yard, the snow continues to fall in the dark. Inside, by smoke and salt, supper is coming closer. Bread reaches the board before anything else, because bread knows it is the dependable friend of the medieval table. It arrives in round loaves and thick slices, some dark and coarse, some lighter if you are seated nearer privilege. You take a piece in your hands and feel the crust resist your fingers. It is not the soft, cloud-like bread of modern supermarkets, wrapped in plastic and suspiciously identical from one end to the other. This bread has weather. It has opinions. It has probably met a few stray bits of husk and grit on its journey from field to mill to oven, and it is not embarrassed about that. The loaf smells warm, sour and earthy. You tear it carefully, because wasting food here would feel almost indecent. Grain has passed through too many hands to be treated lightly. Someone sowed it, weeded it, watched the sky for rain, cut it, bound it, carried it, threshed it, winnowed it, stored it, milled it, kneaded it, baked it, and finally brought it to this hall, where your cold fingers now close around it as if it were treasure, which, in winter, it is. A wooden bowl is placed before you, steam rises from it, carrying the thick smell of peas, onions, leeks, herbs, and old smoke, pottage, humble, filling, endlessly adaptable pottage, It is not glamorous, but glamour is rarely what keeps a body upright through February. You lift the spoon, and the mixture moves slowly, heavy with grains or pulses, perhaps flavoured with bits of bacon, dried fish, or whatever the kitchen has judged available and socially appropriate for your place at the table. It warms your palm through the bowl. That alone makes you briefly loyal to it. In much of medieval Europe, pottage was a common staple across social levels, though ingredients varied greatly by wealth, season, region, and religious calendar. A noble household might enjoy richer versions with meat, spices, or finer grains, while poorer people relied on simpler mixtures of vegetables, legumes, oats, barley, or rye. The same word can cover many lives. That is one of the quiet tricks of history. A dish may have a single name, but inside it are rank, labour, climate, land, and luck. You taste it. It is salty, smoky, a little sweet from softened onions, and thicker than you expect. Not delicate, not elegant, but after the icy road and the bitter yard, it feels almost kind. The warmth moves down your throat and settles in your chest, around you. Spoons scrape bowls in a rhythm that is nearly soothing. A person across the table dips bread into broth and closes their eyes for the smallest moment. Perhaps from pleasure, perhaps from exhaustion, perhaps because in a winter hall. The difference is thin. A platter follows, bearing salted meat sliced in modest pieces, salt beef, pork, or perhaps cured mutton, depending on the stores. Preservation is not optional here. Winter does not care that fresh meat tastes better. Without modern refrigeration, households rely on salting, smoking, drying, pickling, and careful storage. Fish, especially herring, may appear often, particularly on fast days when church rules limit meat. The medieval calendar is full of days that shape what can be eaten, and everyone's stomach has to negotiate with theology. You chew slowly, salt fills your mouth, the meat is firm, almost stern. A little goes a long way, partly because it must. Beside it comes a smear of mustard or a sharp sauce, if the household has such things ready, waking the tongue with vinegar or spice. At the higher tables, sauces may be more elaborate, touched with imported spices that signal wealth as much as flavour. Pepper, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, saffron. These are not everyday luxuries for everyone. They travel far, pass through many merchants, and arrive carrying the scent of distant trade. A pinch of spice can whisper of ships, caravans, counting houses, and ports far beyond this snowy keep. Near your end of the hall, however, supper remains sensible. Bread, pottage, ale, salted food, perhaps cheese, perhaps beans, perhaps a few winter roots. You're not miserable. That is worth noting. Medieval food is often imagined as either mud in a bowl or impossible banquet excess. But most real meals live between those extremes. There is hunger in this world, certainly, and terrible years when harvests fail. But tonight, in this keep, the household has stores, order, and a fire. For the moment, that's enough. Someone sets down a small piece of hard cheese. It smells sharp and barn-like. In the most honest possible way, you eat it with bread, and the salt and sourness wake you gently. A jug goes around again. The ale is low in strength, cloudy, and nourishing. It tastes faintly grainy, maybe a little tart. You drink, and the cup passes on. No one fusses over matching glassware. No one asks whether the pairing works. The pairing is simple. It is cold outside, and this is available. Perfect. Now, tucked into the warmth of the meal, comes one of those odd little details that makes the past feel less distant and more human. Medieval cooks sometimes coloured dishes with ingredients such as saffron, parsley, sandalwood, or even alkanet. Because appearance mattered at elite tables, food could be made yellow, green, red, or darkened for effect. So while your bowl tonight is mostly practical brown, somewhere closer to noble display a cook might be turning supper into edible heraldry. Imagine working all day in a smoky kitchen so a sauce can look impressively gold. Honestly, the commitment deserves applause. At the high table, service is more formal, dishes move in a choreographed pattern, servants present, carve, pour, and withdraw. Fine bread may serve as trenchers, thick slices used beneath food to soak juices, in some places and times. Used trenchers might later go to servants, the poor, or dogs, depending on custom and household practice. Nothing is simple waste if hunger waits nearby. Even leftovers have a social journey. You glance toward the Lord's end and see better cups, brighter cloth. Perhaps a silver salt cellar placed with meaning. Salt is not just seasoning, it is preservation, value, and status. Where the salt sits can mark rank. Also later, tradition strongly suggests, though researchers continue to question how consistently that famous, above-the-salt idea applied across medieval households and periods. The phrase may not map neatly onto every 13th century hall, but the broader point remains plain enough tonight. Food arrangements speak. Everyone hears them. The smoke thickens briefly as a draught troubles the fire, eyes water, someone coughs. The room accepts this with weary discipline. You begin to understand that comfort here is never pure. Warmth comes with smoke. Food comes with salt. Light comes with smell. Shelter comes with hierarchy. Even the bed you're walking toward in your mind will come with complications. Curtains, fleas if fortune is bored, and probably another person's knees if space is tight. Still, compared with the road outside, this hall feels gentle. A servant passes close behind you, carrying a wooden bowl filled with scraps. The dogs become alert, their entire bodies transformed into polite ambition. One places its chin on the bench near your elbow. It does not bark, it simply believes. You pretend not to notice, because you are not supposed to feed it from the table, and also because you are weak. A crumb falls. History records nothing. The dog accepts everything. At the far end, a man begins to tell a low story about a road blocked by snow and a mule that refused to move until offered ale. Whether true or not, it earns quiet laughter. Meals create these little islands of shared breath. Not equality. No. The hall is too ranked for that, but a common rhythm settles over the room. Spoon lifts, bread tears, fire shifts, ale pours. Someone yawns and hides it behind a hand. You finish the last of the pottage, scraping the bowl because you are learning. The warmth inside you is no longer dramatic, just steady. A slower warmth, the kind that reaches the shoulders and loosens the jaw. Outside, the keep remains locked in frost, but here the salt, smoke, bread, and broth have done their modest work. They have not made life easy. They have made it bearable. The meal thins, bowls are lifted away, cups are gathered, crumbs vanish into hands, cloths, and hopeful mouths under the bench. The hall's light softens as some candles burn lower, and now you notice how every flame changes the room, how each small glow marks money, labour, rank, and fear of darkness. The meal quiets in slow layers, not all at once. Bowls vanish into servants' hands, trenchers are lifted, scraps are sorted with the practical attention of people who know that every crust has a destination. The great hall does not become empty. It becomes dimmer, softer, more full of shadows. With the busier scraping and passing finished, you begin to notice the light itself. It is everywhere and nowhere. The hearth gives the broadest glow, pulsing orange and red from the centre of the hall. It warms faces from below and turns eye sockets deep. Noses sharp, hands almost golden, above it. Smoke gathers and rolls in the rafters, catching firelight in dull, shifting bands along the walls and tables. Candles flicker in smaller flames, each one fragile, expensive in its own way, and constantly threatened by drafts that creep in through doors, shutters, vents, and cracks in the stone. A candle near you bends sideways as someone passes. The flame thins, shivers, then stands upright again. You watch it as if it has performed a small act of courage. Most ordinary candles in a household like this are likely made from tallow, rendered animal fat, especially from sheep or cattle. They are cheaper than beeswax, but they smoke, drip, soften, and smell faintly meaty when they burn. Beeswax candles, by contrast, burn cleaner and sweeter, and they are often preferred for chapels, elite use, and ceremonial spaces. Light is not just practical here, it is ranked. Even darkness has social structure. You lean closer to the candle and catch the scent. It is warm, fatty, a little sour, mixed with rushes, ale, ash, and bodies. Not disgusting exactly, just very present. Modern people tend to imagine candlelight as romantic, but tallow candlelight is romance with livestock in the background. A fair compromise, perhaps, if the alternative is sitting in total darkness and wondering what just brushed your ankle. Near the high table, the flames burn more steadily. The candles there may be better set, better protected. Perhaps of finer material. Their light gleams on cups, knives, rings, belt fittings, and the occasional thread of embroidery. Lower down the hall, people rely more on hearth glow and stray flames. A servant carrying a small lamp moves like a floating ember through the gloom, briefly revealing faces, then letting them fall back into shadow. This is how status shows itself without speaking. Who has clear light for reading a letter, counting coin, examining cloth, playing tables, or being admired? Who squints, who works in the flicker at the edge? Light allows attention. It allows fine work. It allows authority to continue after sunset. Darkness presses hardest on those without the means to push it back. The household clerks know this well, somewhere away from the main crush, perhaps in a chamber or at a side table. A literate man may need a candle to check accounts, copy a note, or seal a message. Wax, ink, parchment, and time are all costly. A written record is not just words, it is a small investment of materials, training, and trust. That is why documents from houses like this can feel so oddly alive. They list grain, repairs, fish, candles, wages, debts, and deliveries. They preserve the glow of administration long after the fire has gone out. You see a young servant trim a candle wick with careful fingers. It is a tiny act, but it matters if the wick is too long. The candle gutters and smokes more, if neglected. Light weakens. There are tools for this, including snuffers in wealthier settings. Though tonight a practiced pinch and a bit of caution may do. The servant's face appears briefly in the flame, young, intent, shining with heat. Then the light shifts, and the face becomes part of the room again. An odd little practice from the world of medieval timekeeping drifts into your thoughts. Some households and religious communities used marked candles to measure passing hours, although the method was imperfect and vulnerable to drafts, candle quality, and the general medieval problem of everything being slightly damp. Still, the idea is lovely in a crooked way, time itself shrinking in wax, hour by hour, while everyone hopes the flame lasts long enough. Scholars continue to disagree over how widely candle clocks were used in daily domestic life, rather than in particular monastic, courtly, or literary settings. Evidence survives unevenly, and some later stories make the practice sound neater than real rooms probably allowed. A candle in a drafty hall is less a clock than a hopeful suggestion. Still, tonight, watching the flame shorten by a finger's breadth, you feel how people might have read time in light, ember, prayer, hunger, and fatigue. At the chapel end, or near a side doorway leading that way, a different glow seems to wait. Beeswax, if present, carries a cleaner scent, faintly honeyed. Its use in sacred spaces is not only about quality, it has religious meaning, too. Wax from bees, creatures admired for order and purity in medieval symbolism, suits the altar better than a smoking lump of animal fat. The chapel candles are not merely brighter, they are morally better behaved, which is more than can be said for certain people at the lower benches. A man near you rubs his eyes, his fingertips come away darkened from smoke and ash. He blinks toward the high table, then toward the door, calculating perhaps whether a duty keeps him here or whether sleep may finally be claimed. Sleep in winter is not just rest. It is shelter from cold, hunger, boredom, and the alarming number of chores waiting at dawn. The hall's edges are now mostly shadow. The corners hold benches, chests, hanging cloths, stacked vessels, and things you cannot identify. Shadows make objects uncertain. A folded cloak becomes a crouching creature. A spear haft becoming a thin man. A dog stretched in the rushes becomes a dead log until it snores. Your mind adjusts, then doubts itself, then adjusts again. Candlelight does not reveal a medieval room so much as negotiate with it. You notice how people move through this uncertain light by memory. They know where the step dips. They know which bench end catches a sleeve. They know where the dog usually lies and how far to stretch a hand for the cup. A castle at night is mapped in bodies. No one needs perfect visibility because everyone has learned the room through repetition. Bruises, and possibly one memorable encounter with a bucket. The fire shifts again, a log collapses inward, sending sparks up into the smoke. Conversation dips, then rises. Someone laughs softly. Someone at the upper end calls for another light. A servant responds at once, because darkness near authority must not linger. Another candle is lit from an existing flame. The new wick catches reluctantly, glows, flares, then steadies. Light is passed from light, not created fresh. There is something comforting in that, even here among smoke, tallow, and rank. Your own shadow stretches behind you on the rush-strewn floor. It looks taller than you are, and stranger in this hall. Every person has a second self made of darkness, attached to the fire. Perhaps that is why night in a medieval keep feels so crowded. The living gather, but so do their outlines, their fears, their whispered prayers, their memories of winter roads and locked gates. The candles lower. The best light retreats upward and inward, toward chambers where lordly privacy waits behind better doors. Servants begin to prepare for the next turn of the evening. Cups are carried away, benches shift. A few people will remain near the hall fire, but others will climb or descend according to status, duty, and exhaustion. You follow the glow as it moves toward the stairs, where flame touches stone, then vanishes, then appears again above. The hall behind you settles into smoke and ember. Ahead, the private rooms rise warmer, guarded, painted, enclosed, and full of the careful theatre of comfort. You climb after the candlelight, leaving the wide murmur of the hall below. The stairs turn tightly within the wall, each step worn shallow in the middle by years of feet. Your hand brushes cold stone. It is rough, slightly damp, and unpleasantly eager to remind you that all this talk of warmth has limits. The candle ahead of you throws a wavering circle over the steps, and the person carrying it moves with the confidence of someone who's taken this climb too many times to count. The sound changes as you rise. The hall becomes muffled, then hollow, then almost unreal, like a memory taking place beneath the floor. Up here, the keep holds its breath differently. There are fewer bodies, fewer dogs, fewer bowls, less shouting, and more doors. Doors matter. A door is privacy, and privacy is a luxury in a world where most people sleep, work, eat, and quarrel in shared space. A door that closes properly is not just carpentry, it is status with hinges. At the top of the stair, the passage opens into a chamber lit by several candles and a small fire. The heat is uneven, but compared with the yard, it feels extravagant. A hanging cloth stirs faintly on the wall, where a draught has found a crack. The cloth may show faded patterns, perhaps vines, beasts, saints, or heraldic colours. It helps soften the room, keeping the walls from staring too coldly at everyone. Stone has a way of making even noble comfort feel temporary. This is the Lord's chamber, or one of the private upper rooms used by the Lord, his family, favoured guests and close attendants in castles of this period. The most important domestic spaces are increasingly arranged to create separation from the public bustle of the hall. The Great Hall remains the centre of household display, but chambers allow more controlled intimacy. Sleep, conversation, storage, business, and the careful management of rank. The higher you climb, the more selective the world becomes. You notice the bed first. Of course you do, after walking through snow, smoke, mud, and social hierarchy. The bed draws the eye like a holy relic of comfort. It stands raised from the floor, built of wood, dressed in layers, guarded by curtains that can be drawn to hold warmth and grant privacy. The mattress may be stuffed with straw, wool, flock, or feathers, depending on wealth and availability. Feather bedding is a treasure. Softness itself has a price. In a noble chamber, the bed is not merely furniture. It is wealth on display, a place of rest, illness, birth, negotiation, and sometimes death. Very relaxing. Yes, medieval beds do like to multitask. The bed curtains hang heavy, catching candlelight in folds. They keep out draughts, at least in theory, and create a little room within the room. You can imagine slipping behind them and feeling the air grow warmer from trapped breath and body heat. Not fresh, perhaps, but warm. Freshness is a modern obsession. Tonight, warmth wins the argument without much difficulty. Near the bed stands a chest bound with iron. It is likely locked. Chests are essential furniture, especially in households that move between estates or need to secure valuables, clothing, documents, coins, plate, seals, linens, and personal items may be stored in them. A locked chest is a small fortress inside a larger fortress, because human beings have always understood that walls are useful, but locks are more personal. A table holds writing tools, perhaps wax tablets, parchment, a knife for trimming quills, and a seal. Authority gathers in small objects. A lord may command armed men, but he also depends on clerks, charters, accounts, and messages. The candlelight gleams on a cup, a knife handle, the buckle of a belt laid aside. Everything here seems quieter than in the hall, but not less meaningful. Up here, power lowers its voice. A servant kneels near the fire, coaxing it with a stick. The hearth is smaller than the hall fire, and the chimney, if this room has one, draws better than the open hearth below. By the late 13th century, fireplaces and chimneys are increasingly common in elite domestic rooms, helping to make private chambers more usable in cold weather. That does not mean the room becomes truly cozy by modern standards. No one is wandering barefoot over heated floors, but the fireplace marks a real shift toward more private, managed comfort. A servant adds a split log and waits for it to catch. The flame licks upward, brightening the carved edge of a chair. Chairs are not everywhere. Many people sit on benches, stools, chests, or whatever will hold them without complaint. A proper chair with arms can indicate importance. You look at it and understand that even sitting has politics. On a peg hangs a cloak lined with fur, perhaps squirrel, rabbit, lambskin, or another warm material suitable to rank and purse. Fur in medieval clothing is both practical and symbolic. It says the wearer can afford warmth beyond plain wool. It also says someone trapped, skinned, traded, prepared, and stitched many small lives into a garment. History does not always let comfort remain innocent. Now for the odd little detail tucked among the folds of this noble room. Medieval inventories sometimes list bedclothes with astonishing care, naming coverlets, blankets, sheets, bolsters, pillows, curtains, and even decorative hangings by colour or fabric. A bed could be valuable enough to appear in wills, dowries, and disputes. Imagine being remembered partly by who gets your best blanket. Actually, in a cold century, that is not ridiculous at all. A good blanket is practically a love language. Researchers continue to puzzle over how private these chambers truly felt in daily use. Since elite rooms still contained attendants, family members, visitors, servants moving in and out, and business conducted close to the bed, privacy existed. But it was not modern privacy. It came in layers, a curtain, a threshold, a whispered tone, the right to have fewer people watching you scratch your ankle. You stand near the fire and feel your damp cloak begin to steam faintly. The smell of wet wool rises again, joined by beeswax, ash, warmed wood, and a trace of lavender or dried herbs from a linen chest. Someone has placed rushes here too, fresher than those below. They release a cleaner scent underfoot. The room is still smoky, still cold at the edges. But every object works to persuade you that this is comfort. A woman's voice sounds from beyond a hanging, low and controlled. Another answers. You do not see them clearly, but their presence shifts the room. The Lord's chamber is not only his. Noble women manage households, oversee textiles, food stores, servants, marriages, hospitality, and sometimes estates, especially when men are absent. Their authority may not always appear in the loudest records, but it lives in keys, cloth, accounts, alliances, and instructions delivered at exactly the right moment. A small box is opened, and a scent of spices escapes, sweet and sharp, maybe cloves, maybe cinnamon, perhaps stored for medicine, cooking, or perfumed linen. Imported spices are expensive, and their presence in a private chamber suggests both taste and reach. The snowy keep may feel remote, but trade routes breathe through it, somewhere far away. Warm places have given flavour to this cold room. The candle burns lower. A servant shields it with one hand as a door opens and closes. The flame jumps, then steadies, below. The hall continues its rougher life. Above, the chamber gathers itself for sleep, business, and guarded warmth. The bed waits behind its curtains, softer than most people in this keep will ever know. Yet even here, the wind presses at the shutters, the stone keeps its chill, and the night reminds everyone that rank can improve winter, but not abolish it. You turn toward the stair again, because warmth above depends on labour below. The private room fades behind you, with its painted cloth, feather bedding, locked chest, and candlelit control. Down beneath the polished signs of comfort, servants are still moving through heat, grease, water, soot, and narrow sleeping spaces, making the keep's gentler illusions possible. You descend from the Lord's chamber, and the warmth changes character almost at once above. Warmth had curtains, polished wood, guarded chests, and someone quietly deciding which candle was good enough for which room. Below. Warmth has sleeves rolled up, faces flushed red, hands cracked from water, and a pot that must not boil over because the cook is already in a mood. The stair curves downward, your hand finds the wall again, and the stone feels colder than before, as if the upper chamber borrowed heat but never paid it back. The sounds from below rise in pieces. Metal clinks, water slaps against wood, a door bangs. Someone laughs once, sharply, then hushes. The kitchen world is not sleepy. It is finishing the evening's work, which is very different from resting. You enter a service passage where the air is thick with steam and smoke. The ceiling is low enough to make taller people reconsider their posture. The floor is damp in patches, gritty in others, and scattered with rushes that have clearly lost the will to impress anyone. A servant brushes past carrying a stack of wooden bowls. Another follows with a bucket, walking carefully, because spilling water means fetching more, and fetching more means stepping back into a night that is trying to bite off your fingers. The kitchen itself glows fiercely. This is not the gentle candlelit glow of noble privacy. This is heat with teeth. Fires burn under iron pots and beside spits. Ash gathers at the edges of the hearth. Hooks hang from beams, ladles, knives, chopping boards, baskets, and cloths fill every reachable space. The smell is overwhelming, layered from the day's labour onions, grease, smoke, wet wool, boiling grain, singed fat, stale ale, vinegar, and the mineral smell of hot iron. It is not beautiful in the easy sense, but it is alive. In a great household, kitchens could be large, specialised, and highly organised, especially in elite castles and manor complexes. Cooking for a noble household meant feeding not only the lord and family, but retainers, guests, servants, workers, and sometimes dependents or petitioners. The great hall may receive the drama of supper, but the kitchen is where that drama is chopped, stirred, strained, salted, burned slightly, rescued, plated, and carried out before anyone important grows impatient. A cook stands near the hearth, face shining with sweat despite the winter. He wears a cap or cloth around his head, sleeves tied back, knife at hand, attention everywhere. He's not merely someone who makes food. He manages timing, stores, fire, servants, taste, rank, fasting rules, and the terrifying possibility of running out of something at the wrong moment. He gestures with 2 fingers, and a younger worker moves instantly to shift a pot. There is no need for a grand speech in a kitchen. Command is often a look. You feel the heat on your face, then a cold draft at your back. Medieval service spaces are full of these contradictions. One side of your body roasts, the other shivers, your eyes water from smoke, your mouth waters from the smell of broth, your feet object to the damp floor, your stomach, even recently fed, wonders whether that little scrap of cheese over there is truly being used. History is complex. Yes, but also cheese. Near a side bench, a scullion scrubs a pot with sand, water, and determination. Soap exists in the medieval world, but in a working kitchen, cleaning can involve abrasive materials, hot water when available, lye, ash, sand, and a great deal of elbow pain. The pot resists. The scullion mutters at it as if it has made poor moral choices. You sympathise with both parties. In one corner, leftovers are being sorted, not casually tossed away, but judged. Some scraps go for servants, some for animals. Some may be saved for another preparation. Bones can flavour broth. Fat can be rendered. Stale bread can thicken sauces or potages. A large household produces waste, certainly, but winter teaches thrift with a cold hand on the back of the neck. Nothing useful leaves the kitchen without being considered at least twice. A small, peculiar detail survives from medieval cooking texts and household practice. Certain elite dishes were designed to imitate other foods, especially during fast days. Almond milk could replace dairy in some recipes, and fish or vegetable preparations might be shaped or coloured in playful ways. A cook with enough resources could create illusion at the table. The medieval version of saying, technically, this is permitted, with a completely straight face. The church calendar said no meat today. The kitchen replied, fine, but we shall make the fish look dramatic. There remains lively disagreement about how far written recipe collections reflect ordinary cooking rather than elite display, professional training, or literary performance. The recipes that survive are often from wealthier contexts, while the simpler meals of most workers vanish into silence. So when you watch this kitchen, you hold two truths together. There is skill and variety here, but there is also a great deal of plain food, heavy labour, and repetition that no elegant manuscript bothered to celebrate. A doorway leads toward a scullery or washing area. The air grows colder there, wet and sour. Wooden tubs stand near the wall. Cloths hang stiffening on pegs. A young woman wrings out a rag with red hands, her fingers swollen at the knuckles. She works quickly because wet work in winter punishes any delay. Nearby, another servant wipes down a board and shakes crumbs into a bowl for later use. Their conversation is quiet, but not joyless. A joke passes between them, too low for you to catch, and both smile without pausing. You begin to notice how much of the keep's warmth depends on people who do not enjoy it for long. They carry hot food to others, then return to cold passages. They tend fires in rooms where they may not sleep. They heat water, then plunge their own hands into it until it cools. They prepare feather beds, then lie down on straw, benches, pallets, or shared spaces near the dying fire. Comfort rises through the building because labour pushes it upward. Past the kitchen, sleeping arrangements for servants may be makeshift and varied. Some sleep in the hall after the tables are cleared, others in lofts, corners, passages, outbuildings, or near workplaces where they must rise early. A household of this sort does not provide everyone with a neat private bed and a mint on the pillow, a pallet of straw, a cloak, a shared blanket, and proximity to a wall that blocks the worst draught may count as a successful night. Very exclusive, limited amenities. Plenty of atmosphere. You pass a narrow space where bedding is already being arranged. A roll of straw, a coarse blanket, a cloak folded for a pillow. Someone has tucked a pair of shoes beneath the edge, perhaps to keep them from wandering off into another person's morning. Theft is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is simply the disappearance of the one dry thing you own, which is frankly unforgivable. The warmth here is social rather than luxurious. People sleep near one another because bodies make heat. Privacy is sacrificed to practicality. A person's breath, snore, cough, dream, and midnight complaint may all become part of the room. Modern solitude would seem strange in such a setting, perhaps even wasteful. Why sleep alone in winter if another human body can help defeat the cold? Assuming they do not kick, a bell or call sounds faintly from above. Someone curses softly, not quite under the breath, and lifts a covered dish from a shelf. Work is not done. Work is rarely done. The keep may be drawing towards sleep, but the servants live in the gap between one demand and the next. You linger at the edge of the passage, feeling the kitchen heat fade behind you and the stair draught return. The Lord's chamber above had seemed enclosed, secure, almost still. Down here everything moves: fire, water, hands, scraps, bowls, orders, tired jokes, and the endless small corrections that keep hunger, dirt, and cold from taking over completely. A servant carrying embers in a covered pan passes toward another room. Careful with every step, light moves with them, red through the slits, like a captured sunset. You follow at a distance until the passage bends and opens toward the outer stair. Beyond it, the night waits on the wall, where a watchman stands beneath the stars, listening for sounds beyond the moat while the keep behind him slowly settles. You climb toward the wall, and the warmth of the kitchen slips away behind you like a dream you did not fully appreciate while you had it. The passage narrows, then opens to an exterior stair, and the night meets you at once. Cold air presses into your face. It is so clean after the kitchen smoke that it feels almost sharp enough to drink. Your breath appears in front of you, pale and brief, then vanishes into the dark. The battlements lie ahead, edged with frost and moonlight. Stone underfoot has frozen hard, and every step must be placed with care. A careless stride here could end with you sprawled in a very undignified shape, and no one in 1296 has invented sympathy as a reliable public service. The wall walk is narrow, guarded by a parapet on one side and the drop to the ward on the other, below. The castle yard has quieted, though not completely. A horse shifts in the stable. A door latch clicks. Somewhere near the kitchens, a late servant moves with a lantern, a small yellow star below your feet. The watchman stands beneath a hood and cloak, shoulders raised against the wind. He holds a spear, or perhaps a billhook, and keeps a horn within reach. He's not standing heroically with hair streaming in the moonlight. He is hunched, practical, and likely thinking about his toes. The glamour of guard duty fades quickly when the frost begins travelling upward through your boots. He glances at you, recognizes that you're allowed to be there, or at least not immediately worth shouting about, and returns his gaze to the land beyond the ditch, out there. The snow opens into fields and road, pale where the moon touches it, black where hedges and trees gather. The world beyond the walls is not empty, it only seems so. Winter hides movement. A fox can cross a field like a thought. A traveller can disappear into a fold of land. A group of armed men, if they are quiet and determined, can become visible far later than everyone would prefer. Castle watches were part of ordinary defensive routine, especially in unsettled regions or times of conflict. Guards checked gates, walls, fires, and approaches, and households organised night watches according to local need, season, threat, and available manpower. The castle's strength is not only stone. Stone does not wake itself. Stone does not hear a suspicious hoofbeat. Stone does not decide whether that distant light is a shepherd, a thief, or someone bringing deeply inconvenient news. You rest one hand on the parapet. Frost gathers along the upper edge like pale fur. The stone bites through your glove. The air smells of snow, wood smoke, animal yards, and far-off damp earth. Below, the moat or ditch lies dark, its ice faintly dull under the moon. The wind slides over it and up the wall, lifting the edge of your cloak. You pull it tight and immediately understand why no one on watch is feeling poetic unless they're trying very hard. The watchman listens more than he looks. That surprises you at first, but sound travels strangely on a cold night. A cartwheel can complain from far along a frozen road. A dog bark can jump across fields. Ice can crack in a ditch with the dry snap of a breaking stick. The watchman tilts his head now and then, reading the dark with his ears. Far away, a bell sounds. It may be from a chapel, a settlement, or another part of the household's timekeeping. The note is faint and lonely. It crosses the snow, fades, then seems to remain inside your head. In a medieval night, bells do more than mark time. They organize prayer, work, alarm, curfew, and memory, where modern people check glowing screens. People here listen for metal in the dark, honestly. A bell is less likely to ruin your sleep with market news, so perhaps they had one advantage. A curious old practice belongs to the wider world of watch and ward. In some towns and fortified places, rules required residents to keep weapons ready or contribute to night watches, and failure could bring fines. Security was not only a professional matter, it was an obligation that could reach into households, trades, and neighbourhoods. Imagine being fined because you failed to stand in the cold at midnight with a polearm. A deeply medieval reminder that civic duty sometimes comes with numb fingers. There is still disagreement among researchers about how regularly castle night watches were kept in quieter periods, especially in smaller sites where records are thin. Some routines may have been strict during wartime and relaxed when danger seemed remote. Others may have depended on local personalities, available money, and whether the person in charge was cautious or cheerfully negligent. Tonight, in this keep, the watch feels necessary. The year has a nervous edge. Roads carry rumours. Borders and loyalties can shift faster than snowdrifts. The watchman points with his chin toward a dark line of trees. Wolves, he says, perhaps joking, perhaps not. Wolves still live in parts of medieval Europe, feared, hunted, woven into stories and complaints. Whether one is actually near tonight is another matter, but winter makes imagination hungry. Every sound beyond the walls becomes something with teeth. You listen. At first, there is only wind, then the faint rustle of dry reeds, then a dull thud from the stable below, then silence again, but not empty silence, more like a held breath. From up here, the keep looks different. The hall roof exhales smoke, the kitchen yards glow in low patches, the private chamber windows are dim, carefully shuttered. The chapel may hold one steady point of light. All the labour you pass through lies beneath you now in layers. Stores, stables, servants, hall, chamber, fire, prayer. The wall surrounds them all. But the wall also depends on one tired human being staying awake. You ask how long his watch lasts, or perhaps he tells you without being asked. Because cold people sometimes speak to prove they are still alive. The hours are divided according to custom. He may be relieved later by another man, though later in winter can feel like a theological concept rather than a measurable future. He stamps his feet. The sound is dull against the frozen walk. You notice his cloak has been mended many times. The patches overlap like little maps of hardship. His belt holds a knife, a pouch, maybe a bit of bread wrapped in cloth. He has brought something to chew, perhaps because the body wants activity when sleep is forbidden. He rubs his hands, then tucks them under his arms. The spear rests against the parapet, close enough to grab. Below, a dog begins barking in the yard. One bark, then three, then a pause. Both you and the watchman turn. Another dog answers from near the gatehouse. The sound travels up the wall, sharp and alert. A guard below calls softly. A lantern appears, moving through the yard. For a moment, the whole castle seems to tighten around the noise. Then a shape slips across the snow near the refuse pit. A fox, thin and clever, vanishing almost as quickly as it appears. The dog continues to announce its triumph over the concept of fox. The watchman exhales through his nose. You cannot tell if it is amusement or irritation, possibly both. The tension dissolves, leaving the cold behind. You realize how watchfulness works on the body. It spikes, settles, spikes again. Nothing happens, and yet nothing happening is the result of attention. A quiet night is not proof the watch is pointless. It is the thing the watch is trying to preserve. The moon lifts higher. Frost brightens along the merlons. Your fingers ache. The wind slides under your hood with personal malice. You think of the hall fire, the kitchen steam, the noble bed curtains, and even the smoky candle beside the bench. Every warm place in the keep now feels astonishingly generous. The watchman turns back to the fields. You turn inward, toward the stair that will carry you down from the stars and stone. Behind you, the wall remains awake, listening over the ditch, over the road, over the snow, ahead. A quieter light waits in the chapel, where fear, duty, and cold hands will be softened for a little while by prayer. You descend from the wall with the cold still wrapped around you, tucked into your sleeves and hiding behind your ears. The stair feels darker after the moonlit battlements. Each turn pulls you away from the open night and back into the keep's inner breathing, back towards smoke, wool, stone, and the low murmur of people who are trying to finish being awake. At the foot of the stair, the passage narrows and bends. A servant passes carrying a small lamp, the flame cupped behind a horn or thin scraped hide to keep it from dying in the draught. For a heartbeat, your shadow leaps along the wall like a startled animal. Then the lamp moves on, and the passage dims again. You follow a faint, cleaner glow ahead, different from the kitchen fires and hall candles. It is steadier, quieter, almost watchful. The chapel door stands partly open. Inside, the air changes. It is still cold. Of course, because holiness does not come with central heating, a tragic oversight. But the chapel holds a different kind of warmth. Beeswax, stone dust, old wood, a trace of incense, and the faint human smell of damp wool kneeling too close together. The room is smaller than the hall, and the ceiling gathers sound softly. Every shuffle seems respectful, even when it is simply someone trying to move a numb knee without groaning. You step in and lower your voice without deciding to. Everyone does. That is what sacred spaces do. They reach into the throat and turn the volume down. A few candles burn near the altar. Their flames shine cleaner than tallow, pale gold and almost still. The altar cloth is plain or modestly fine, depending on the wealth of this household. And beyond it perhaps stands a painted panel, a small crucifix, or images of saints. The colours are dim in candlelight, but you can make out a red robe, a blue fold, a gilded edge catching the flame. The faces look calm in the way painted saints often look calm, as if they have already heard every human complaint and are not surprised by any of them. A priest or chaplain moves near the altar, murmuring words in Latin. You may not understand every phrase, unless you are unusually educated for your place here. But comprehension is not the only point. The sound itself carries meaning. It marks order. It places this cold night inside a larger pattern of prayer, sin, mercy, fear, and hope. Medieval Christianity fills the calendar, the day, the body, the household, and the imagination. Prayer before sleep is not a decorative habit. It is protection, duty, comfort, and preparation for a world where death can enter quietly, even through a winter cough. In noble households, private chapels or chapel spaces were common signs of status and devotion. A castle chapel served daily worship, masses, feast days, family commemoration, and the spiritual needs of the household. It could also reinforce the Lord's authority, because piety, like hospitality, had a social presence. A household that prays together may still argue over land, inheritance, and who stole the better blanket. But it does so under the eyes of saints. You kneel, or stand near the back if that is where you belong. The floor presses through your clothing with immediate honesty. Stone does not care that you are having a meaningful experience. Your knees protest. Someone beside you shifts and exhales slowly. Ahead. A child leans against an older woman, fighting sleep and losing with dignity. The woman places a hand on the child's shoulder, not looking down. Because this has happened before. This, too, is prayer, keeping someone small upright until the blessing is finished. The chapel's light pulls at the edges of faces. The watchman's world of dark fields and possible foxes feels far away now. Though the same cold surrounds both places, in here, danger is spoken to rather than watched for. People pray for safety from illness, violence, hunger, fire, childbirth, storms, bad harvests, enemies, sudden death, and the 1,000 uninvited things that can step into a medieval life. They ask saints to intercede. They cross themselves. They make promises they may or may not keep once the weather improves. A small object rests near the altar. Perhaps a reliquary. Perhaps only a covered vessel or a treasured devotional item. Relics, the physical remains or possessions associated with saints, hold immense importance in medieval religious culture. Great churches compete for them, pilgrims travel for them, and even smaller communities may treasure fragments, tokens, or objects linked to holy power. Some relics are genuine in the eyes of devotion, some doubtful, some wildly optimistic. Medieval Europe is, among many other things, a continent of sacred fragments and very confident labels. Here is a wonderfully odd corner of that world. Some churches claim to possess highly unusual relics, including things like the milk of the Virgin Mary, feathers from angel wings, or pieces of saints multiplied across geography in quantities that would make anatomy deeply confusing. People were not necessarily foolish for believing in them. They lived in a culture where matter and spirit touch constantly, where the holy could enter cloth, bone, oil, wax, and water still. You're allowed one gentle modern eyebrow raise, just one, quietly, in the back. Careful readers of the past continue to question how ordinary believers balance sincere devotion with doubts about suspicious relics, especially since medieval writers themselves sometimes mocked fraud and excessive claims. Belief was not always simple. People could be reverent and skeptical, hopeful and practical, frightened and witty, sometimes all before breakfast. Tonight, no one in this chapel is conducting a formal investigation. The candles burn, the prayers continue, the cold is real, and comfort is welcome wherever it can be found. The chaplain's voice rises slightly, then softens. You hear responses from those gathered, some clear, some murmured, some half swallowed by sleep. Latin words move through the room like a slow river. The rhythm matters more than your full understanding. It lets the mind loosen. It gives the night a shape. Earlier, on the wall, every sound might have been a threat. Here, sound becomes shelter. You smell incense faintly, perhaps from an earlier service, clinging to cloth and wood. It mingles with beeswax in a way that feels cleaner than the hall. The chapel is not free from the body. People still cough, sniff, shift, and carry the day's odours in their clothes. But the space invites them to be more than tired bodies. It gives them souls to worry over, which is not always restful, but it is deeply medieval. A noblewoman kneels nearer the front, her veil catching light at the edge. A servant kneels farther back, hands folded, eyes lowered. Their places differ, as always. Rank has followed everyone through the chapel door, yet before the altar, the hierarchy bends, if it does not disappear. Lord and laundress alike must face judgment, mercy, and mortality. The afterlife is one of the few places where the seating plan becomes less secure. The prayer closes, a blessing is given, people cross themselves, touching forehead, chest, shoulder, shoulder, each motion small and practiced. You feel the gesture around you like a ripple. The chapel does not empty quickly. Some linger for a final whisper, a request tucked into the dark. A mother murmurs a saint's name for a sick child. A man touches a charm at his neck, then looks slightly embarrassed and does it anyway. The official and the personal sit side by side, as they often do. Candles remain burning near the altar as the household begins to drift out. Their flames lean but do not fail. You step back into the passage, and the ordinary sounds return with surprising force, a cough from the hall, a bucket set down too hard, a muffled laugh, a dog shaking itself awake. The sacred quiet thins behind you, but it leaves something in your breathing. The keep is moving closer to sleep now, not all at once, never all at once. Work continues in corners. Watches continue on the wall. Fires need tending. And someone somewhere is still looking for a missing shoe. But the prayer has softened the night's edge. It has gathered fear, cold, memory, and hope into a brief pool of candlelight. You follow the passage toward the hearth again, where women sit with spinning, mending, brewing talk, and low voices, holding the household together in ways so constant that only a fool would call them small. You return toward the hearth, and the chapel's quiet follows you for a few steps, like a soft cloak over your shoulders. Then the keep gently reclaims you. The ordinary noises return, a latch clicking into place, a cough behind a hanging, a dog sighing as if personally responsible for the sorrows of the age. Somewhere a pot is being moved. Somewhere a tired servant is being told that yes, unfortunately, one more thing must be done before sleep. Near the side of the hall, where the fire has lowered into a broad bed of embers, a small circle of women has gathered. Not a formal circle, not a scene arranged for your benefit, but the natural shape made by work, warmth, and habit. One sits on a low stool with a spindle. Another bends over a torn sleeve. A third checks a basket of linen, lifting and folding each piece with practiced hands. A younger girl sits nearby, trying to copy a stitch, her brow furrowed as if the fate of Christendom depends on this hem. Perhaps, to her, it does. You settle where you can feel the heat without intruding. The fire is quieter now, more glow than flame. It lights faces from the side and leaves the rest in soft brown shadow. The smell here is different from the kitchen and chapel. Warm wool, linen, smoke, a faint sourness from ale, a trace of herbs from a bundle drying near the hearth. The sounds are gentle and repetitive thread drawn through cloth, spindle turning, wool teased between fingers, a small snip of shears, the click of a wooden distaff against a knee. This is not idleness. It only looks calm because the work has been repeated so often that the body remembers it. Textile labour fills medieval life. Wool must be sorted, washed, carded, spun, woven, fulled, dyed, cut, sewn, patched, and washed again. Linen begins in flax fields, then passes through soaking, breaking, scutching, heckling, spinning, weaving, and stitching. Clothing and bedding consume astonishing amounts of time. Every sleeve, sheet, veil, blanket, tunic, and towel holds hours of human touch, mostly women's touch, though men work in textile trades too, especially in urban guild context. In a household like this, women's daily labour is one of the main engines of comfort. The woman with the spindle draws wool into thread while speaking softly to the one mending. Her fingers move without pause. The spindle drops, twirls, lengthens the thread, then is caught and wound. It is almost hypnotic. Twist, draw, drop, turn, wind, again, again, again. You begin to understand how such work can fill evenings. It fits into the spaces between cooking, tending, nursing, washing, brewing, carrying, supervising, and remembering who needs what by morning. A small pot near the hearth gives off a yeasty smell. Brewing has touched this room too. Ale in many households is closely linked with women's work, especially domestic brewing, though commercial brewing grows more regulated and more male-dominated in some towns over time. Ale is not a luxury garnish on life. It is nourishment, wages, hospitality, and daily routine. Someone must malt grain, heat water, manage fermentation, clean vessels, and judge when the drink has turned from promising to suspicious. That line matters. Nobody wants a household full of people discovering at breakfast that the ale has chosen violence. One of the women lifts a strip of cloth and examines it in the firelight. The weave is uneven but strong. She runs a thumb along a patched place and nods once. A modern wardrobe may hide torn things at the back until guilt becomes inconvenient. But here, cloth is too valuable for casual neglect. Patching is not failure. It is care. It is memory. A garment may pass from one person to another, be altered for a child, cut down, lined, turned, or remade into something humbler before finally becoming rags. Even rags have work to do. A little peculiar detail slips into the scene with the smell of warm wool spindle whirls. Those small weights used to help spindles spin are found by archaeologists in huge numbers across medieval sites. Some are plain, some decorated, some made from bone, stone, lead, clay, or reused material. They're small enough to vanish into earth, but together they whisper of constant making. It is tempting to call them humble objects, yet without them. Who is clothed? Who is warm? Who sleeps under a coverlet instead of shivering dramatically for the benefit of no one? The written records, unfortunately, do not always honour this labour properly. Estate accounts may mention purchases of cloth, payments to laundresses, wages for female servants, or brewing expenses, but the full texture of women's work often has to be reconstructed from scattered evidence. Specialists read the material differently. Some emphasize women's central economic agency within households, while others warn that rank, marriage status, age, and local custom-shaped opportunities so much that no single picture will do. Tonight, by the hearth, you can feel both truths. The work is powerful, the limits are real. An older woman begins to tell a story while she stitches. Her voice is low, steady, and dry with humour. It concerns a neighbour, a missing goose, and a man who insisted he was innocent while holding feathers. The others smile without looking up. The girl with the difficult hem laughs too loudly and is gently shushed. Stories live in these work circles as naturally as thread. They carry warnings, jokes, family memory, news, and judgment. A person can be praised, teased, or quietly ruined in reputation while a sleeve is repaired. Very efficient. You notice the keys at one woman's belt. They hang from a ring and catch the firelight when she shifts. Keys mean responsibility. Stores, chests, linen, ale, spices, perhaps even accounts or locked rooms. In many elite households, the lady of the house or senior women could have major responsibility for domestic management, including food supply, textiles, servants, hospitality, and the care of household goods. Authority does not always arrive in armour. Sometimes it arrives with keys and a clear memory of how many sheets should be in the chest. The girl finally gets her stitch right. The older woman sees but does not praise her immediately. Let the lesson settle first. Then, after several heartbeats, she says, "Better." The girl's face glows more than the embers. A small word can warm a child very well. You draw your cloak closer and listen. The room has changed since supper. The hall that ranked everyone so boldly now feels lower, more domestic, though the hierarchy has not vanished. Servants still know when to rise, whom to answer, where not to sit, but the fire's edge allows quieter forms of belonging, a shared joke, a borrowed needle, a piece of advice about a cough, a warning that a certain man near the stables talks too much and listens too little. One woman rubs her wrist and flexes her fingers. Repetitive work leaves marks, spinning, washing, kneading, lifting, carrying water, scrubbing cloth, turning spits, tending children. All of it lives in joints and skin. Her hands are rough, nails short, knuckles reddened. Yet the thread she makes is fine. You're reminded that skill is often hidden inside ordinary movement. The past becomes smaller and poorer when we only look for battles, kings, and dramatic betrayals. The keep survives because someone knows how to mend a seam before it tears wide open. The fire sinks lower, a servant adds a small piece of wood, not too much. Fuel must last. Sparks climb, then fade. The women gather their work slowly. Linen goes back into baskets, thread is wound. The spindle is tucked away. The girl folds her practice piece with exaggerated care, hoping someone notices. Someone does. Beyond the hearth, the keep leans deeper into night. In one corner, a child's voice complains of sleepiness while claiming not to be sleepy at all. Near the benches, a page tries to hide a yawn and fails completely. The women's work has steadied the room, patched its edges, softened its harshness. Now the younger lives of the keep begin to show themselves, restless and drowsy, full of lessons, chores, games, and small mischief under winter roofs. The child's complaint about sleepiness grows softer, which is the first sign that sleep is winning. It is always like this. A small person insists they are not tired, then blinks slowly at the fire as if the flames have begun telling secrets. Near the benches, a page tries to straighten his shoulders and look alert, but his yawn opens anyway, enormous and helpless. Someone notices. Someone always notices. A quiet laugh moves along the edge of the hall. You remain near the hearth while the work baskets are gathered away, and the younger lives of the keep come into focus. They have been present all evening, slipping between adults, carrying errands, fetching stools, watching, learning, being scolded, being overlooked. Now, as the household settles, children and adolescents appear more clearly, like mice after the loudest boots have passed. Not that you should compare them too closely to mice, though one boy near the wall is absolutely nibbling a stolen crust with the same guilty devotion. In a castle household, childhood is shaped by rank as sharply as adulthood. A noble child may learn manners, prayers, music, riding, reading, household management, or the beginnings of military training, depending on gender, family ambition, and available tutors. A page in service to a lord may learn discipline, table service, horsemanship, and the habits of elite society. A servant's child, if present, learns work early, because winter does not pause politely for a long childhood. The modern idea of childhood as a protected little kingdom exists only in fragments here, usually where wealth can afford it. A boy of perhaps 11 carries cups toward the lower end of the hall, concentrating fiercely. He wears a tunic that may once have belonged to someone larger, and the hem has been adjusted with practical stitches. He walks around the dogs with the caution of a person who suffered betrayal at ankle level before. One hound raises its head, considers the cups, then decides there is no food involved and returns to its serious work of sleeping. At the edge of the firelight, two younger children play with bits of bone, wood, or pebbles, arranging them into a tiny kingdom of their own. One whispers orders, the other objects. A third child, too small to be trusted with diplomacy, reaches in and knocks down a wall. A brief scandal follows. No blood, no tragedy. Just the ancient collapse of civilization caused by a toddler with confidence. Toys in the medieval world could be simple, homemade, and very familiar to modern eyes. Archaeologists have found small items such as toy horses, dolls, miniature vessels, spinning tops, whistles, gaming pieces, and balls. Children did not live in a separate plastic universe. Bless them. But they played. They imagined. They copied adults. They turned scraps into stories. A castle full of rank and duty still contains a child making a horse out of a stick and taking it extremely seriously. A girl sits beside an older woman and practices a prayer in a low voice. She stumbles over the words, then tries again. The older woman corrects her without harshness. Faith, manners, memory, and obedience are learned by repetition, just like stitching and spinning across the room. A page repeats a phrase in French or Anglo-Norman under his breath, perhaps learning the language of status and courtly behaviour. Latin belongs to clergy and records. French still carries elite weight in many English noble circles in this period. English lives everywhere too, growing and changing in kitchens, yards, villages, and the mouths of people who do not appear often enough in official documents. If the hall could speak all at once, it would not sound like one tidy language lesson, it would sound like social history with a cold nose. The evidence for how medieval children understood their own world is frustratingly uneven. Adults wrote most of the surviving records, and adults have always had a talent for misunderstanding the young while claiming otherwise. Some writings describe children as innocent, sinful, playful, foolish, precious, useful, or fragile. Depending on the writer's purpose, material finds show care and play, while legal and household records show responsibility and discipline. The past does not hand you a single clear answer. It gives you a small wooden toy, a punishment noted in passing, a prayer book, a pair of tiny shoes, and asks you to be patient. A sudden squeak comes from behind a bench, a real mouse this time, not a child. The stolen crust boy freezes, the mouse freezes, for a perfect moment. They regard one another as rivals in the same profession. Then the mouse vanishes into the rushes, and the boy quietly places his crust inside his sleeve. Smart boy. In this keep, even crumbs have competitors. The younger pages are not free to sprawl for long. One is called to help carry a folded cloth. Another must take a message to a chamber. Another checks that a jug is set where it should be. Service teaches movement through hierarchy, when to speak, when to look down, when to answer, how to hold a cup, how to stand behind a chair without becoming furniture in spirit, for boys of gentle birth. Page service can be part of the path toward knighthood, though the exact route varies by place, family, and fortune for others. Service is employment, survival, or obligation, less romantic and more urgent. Near the hearth, the smallest children drift toward the safest bodies. One leans against a woman's skirt, another curls beside a dog, and the dog, with surprising grace, allows this arrangement. The animal's warmth is irresistible. The child's hand disappears into its fur, and the dog releases a sigh that suggests both patience and deep personal sacrifice. You catch a bit of whispered mischief from two older children near a side passage. They have discovered something important. Perhaps that a certain servant has hidden sweetened crumbs, or that one of the stable cats has kittens, or that the sleepy page can be made to startle if touched with a cold spoon. History does not record this conspiracy, which is a shame, because it appears to be organised with more energy than several royal councils. A peculiar little survival from medieval schooling deserves its place beside them. Children learning Latin grammar often used hornbooks or wax tablets in later and varied forms. And students could be corrected with physical discipline that modern listeners would not find charming. Education was precious, but not always gentle. A child might repeat prayers, letters, moral sayings, or grammar rules until the words stuck, and if they did not stick, well, The teacher might have opinions and a rod. Medieval pedagogy memorable, for all the wrong reasons. Still, tenderness is here too. You see it in the woman brushing crumbs from a child's cheek with her thumb, in the older boy helping a younger one tie a belt, in the page who secretly shares a warm corner of the bench, in the sleepy girl being lifted, half protesting, half melted, by someone who knows the exact weight of her at night. The keep is not a modern home, but it is not only a machine of rank and labour either. It holds affection in small, practical shapes: a patched sleeve, a saved crust, a better place near the fire, a whispered warning not to wake the cook, a hand over a child's eyes when the candle flares too bright. One by one, the children are gathered towards sleep, duty, or both. Pages remain awake longer if service demands it. Younger ones are guided away to pallets, corners, chambers, or shared beds according to rank. A noble child may disappear behind better hangings. A servant's child may curl near warmth wherever permitted. The social order follows them into sleep. But so does the same human need to be covered, held, and allowed to stop trying for a while. The boy with the hidden crust finally gives in. His head dips, his chin jerks up, dips again. The crust slips from his sleeve, and the dog, historian of floor level, secures the evidence. No one speaks of it. Some mysteries should remain unresolved. The hall grows quieter. The games vanish into baskets, sleeves, and memory. The little wooden kingdom remains half destroyed beneath the bench, waiting for morning politics. From another passage comes a cough, then a low groan from someone with waking joints. The cold night presses on young and old alike, and soon the keep will turn toward herbs, charms, poultices, prayers, and all the tender, strange remedies people trust when winter settles into the bones. The cough comes again from the passage, low and rough, followed by the kind of silence that means everyone nearby has noticed and is deciding whether to be worried, in a medieval keep on a frosty night. A cough is never only a cough, it is a sound with possibilities. It might be smoke in the throat, cold air in the chest, a day's exhaustion, or the first small knocking of something that will keep the household anxious until dawn. You follow the sound into a narrower room off the hall, where the warmth is softer and more crowded. A small fire burns low, its light catches clay cups, wooden bowls, bundles of herbs hanging from a beam, folded cloths, and a stool with one uneven leg. Someone has brought the coughing man to sit near the heat, his cloak wrapped around him, his face flushed in patches. He is not dying dramatically for the benefit of a poet. He is merely miserable, which is far more common and much less convenient. A woman bends over him with a cup. Steam rises from it, smelling of honey, ale, and something bitter from the herb bundle. He drinks, makes a face, and drinks again. This is how you know the remedy may be working, or at least that everyone believes suffering should taste medicinal nearby. Another person warms a cloth by the fire, then presses it to aching hands. The room is a small workshop of discomfort. Coughs, stiff joints, chilblains, old injuries, sore teeth, smoke-irritated eyes. And winter skin all gather here without ceremony. Medieval medicine is not simply nonsense wrapped in superstition, though it certainly has its more adventurous moments. Learned physicians, where available and affordable, may draw on ancient Greek and Arabic medical traditions, including the theory of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health is often understood as a balance of qualities such as hot, cold, wet, and dry. But most household care is practical, local, and immediate. Herbs, rest, warmth, diet, prayer, observation, and the remembered wisdom of women, monks, healers, and neighbours all meet around the sickbed. The woman with the cup may not quote Galen, she may not need to. She knows that warmth helps a shivering body, that honey eases a throat, that certain herbs are trusted for coughs, that a person who cannot keep food down is in trouble, and that a fever must be watched. She also knows which remedies are safe enough to try, and which belong to people who confidently mistake danger for creativity. An ancient human problem. On the table lies a bundle of sage, perhaps, or horehound, or hyssop, or thyme, depending on what has been gathered, bought, dried, and kept through the season. Lavender may be stored for scent and comfort. Rue, betony, comfrey, plantain, yarrow, and many other herbs belong to medieval medical and household traditions in different regions. Some uses have practical effects, some are symbolic, some are hopeful. Many sit somewhere in between, which, honestly, is where human beings spend much of their time. A small charm hangs around the neck of a child sleeping in the corner, a pouch sewn tight with something inside, a written prayer, perhaps a bit of herb, a tiny object meant to protect. You can feel modern skepticism rise politely in your mind, but the room does not care when winter is outside, when children cough, when doctors are far away or too expensive. Protection takes many shapes. A charm may be faith, memory, comfort, or community in miniature. One strange remedy from medieval medical writing involves using animal ingredients that sound to modern ears like the results of a dare. Dried toads, powdered worms, hare fat, fox lungs, and other unlikely substances appear in various texts and traditions. Not all were used everywhere, and not every person believed every recipe. Still, the medieval medicine cabinet occasionally looks less like a pharmacy and more like someone lost a bet with a swamp. Gentle sarcasm aside. The impulse is familiar. People search the natural world for help wherever they thought power might hide. The surviving evidence does not settle how closely ordinary households followed written medical texts. Some recipes were copied by literate elites, clergy, and professional practitioners, while many everyday treatments passed orally and vanished without record. Medical historians read these sources with care because a manuscript recipe does not prove common use, and a common practice may leave no manuscript at all in this room. The line between learned medicine and household care is blurred by steam, urgency, and the practical question of whether the coughing man can sleep. Someone mentions bleeding, another dismisses it for tonight. Bloodletting is widely used in medieval medicine under certain theories of balance, but timing, condition, season, age, and practitioner judgment matter. It is not necessarily the first response to every sniffle, despite what jokes about the Middle Ages may suggest. People are not caricatures. They can be wrong in complicated, internally logical ways. Modern people, let us remember. Also buy questionable cold remedies at midnight and call it research. The coughing man drinks again. His breathing eases a little, perhaps from the warm liquid, perhaps from the rest, perhaps because the fire is kind and the room is calmer than the hall. A young servant rubs her hands near the flames, showing angry red patches across the knuckles. Chilblains can torment people in cold, damp conditions, causing itching, swelling, and pain when skin is exposed to repeated cold. She flexes her fingers and winces. The older woman notices and passes her a bit of salve from a small pot. It smells of fat, herbs, and smoke. The servant applies it carefully, as if anointing a saint. If the saint had spent all day hauling water. In another corner, someone complains of toothache. This earns several sympathetic murmurs, because tooth pain is a tyrant with no respect for rank. Medieval dental care includes cleaning practices, tooth powders, charms, extractions, and remedies using herbs or wine. But if decay has gone deep, comfort may be brief and extraction brutal. Tonight the sufferer presses a cloth to the jaw and receives advice from 3 people at once, which proves that unsolicited medical commentary is not a modern invention. The room smells stronger as the fire warms the salves and cups. Honey sweetness, bitter leaves, grease, sweat, damp wool. The scent is not unpleasant. Exactly. It is intimate. It says bodies are fragile and everybody knows. After the grandeur of the keep, the ranked hall, the watch on the wall, and the chapel's candlelit order, this room brings you close to the basic truth beneath all of it. People ache. They fear fever. They want their children to breathe easily. They want pain to pass. They want mourning. A soft prayer is spoken over the coughing man. Not loudly, not formally, just enough to place the remedy inside God's hearing. No one sees contradiction in herb and prayer working together. The medieval world often joins physical and spiritual care, because illness may be natural, moral, demonic, seasonal, divine, environmental, or simply mysterious. Depending on who is explaining and how frightened everyone feels, a warm cloth and a saint's name can sit comfortably in the same hand. The man's eyelids lower, his cup is taken before he spills it. Someone adjusts his cloak, a small kindness, and therefore not small at all. The salve pot is closed, the herb bundle is rehung. The woman by the fire tells the toothache sufferer to sleep sitting up if lying down worsens the pain. He grumbles, but he listens. Beyond the room, the keep continues to settle. The children have grown quiet. The kitchen is nearly still. The wall watch remains awake in the frost. Here, winter aches attended with what the household has knowledge, habit, faith, fat, cloth, bitter leaves, and hands that have done this before. You step back toward the hall carrying the smell of herbs in your cloak. The fire behind you dims to a red glow. Ahead. The night deepens in the stone passages, and soon the whole keep will become a listening place, filled with mice, snores, chains, embers, dripping roofs, and uneasy dreams behind thick walls. You step back into the hall, and for a moment it feels as if the entire keep is listening to itself. The larger noises of evening have retreated, supper is finished, prayers have faded, the last remedies have been poured, rubbed, muttered over, and placed near the fire. Now the night inside the stone begins to speak in smaller voices. At first, you hear the embers. They settle with soft clicks and sighs, collapsing inward under a grey skin of ash. Every so often a red coal brightens, breathes, and dims again. The hall fire has become less ablaze than a memory of flame. It gives just enough glow to shape the benches, the rushes, the curled bodies of dogs, and the dim outlines of people finding their places for sleep. The warmth is lower now, close to the ground, where dogs and tired feet appreciate it most. The rafters vanish into darkness, smoke has thinned, but its smell lingers in everything, in cloth, hair, wood, and the back of your throat. You taste ash when you swallow, you feel it on your skin, a faint film from the long evening by fire and candle. Medieval night is not clean darkness, it is used darkness. Darkness that has held cooking, talking, working, praying, coughing, and the long endurance of a winter household. You move carefully because the hall is full of things that would like to trip you. A low stool, a sleeping hound, a bundle of cloth, someone's feet, the remains of the little wooden kingdom beneath the bench. The floor rushes rustle underfoot, and something tiny scurries away. A mouse, perhaps, or several. The keep has walls against armed men, but mice are unimpressed by feudal architecture. They live in the cracks of power. Grain stores, Kitchens, rushes, and warm corners make castles attractive to rats and mice, and households fought them with cats, traps, dogs, storage practices, and sheer irritation. Pest control is one of those unglamorous facts that belongs in every honest picture of medieval life. Behind every noble feast stands someone trying to keep small teeth out of the flour. Behind every storeroom door is a silent negotiation with creatures who have no respect for inventory. A cat slides along the wall, pale in the ember glow, moving with royal entitlement. It pauses, lifts one paw, and listens. Then it vanishes behind a chest. No trumpet sounds for this vital employee. No chronicle records the patrol. Yet the cat may save more grain than a boastful knight saves honour on an average Tuesday. History is unfair that way. The sound from the wall watch reaches you faintly through the keep a footstep above. Then nothing. A chain at the gate shifts in the wind. Metal touching metal with a low clink. Somewhere, water drips. You look up, trying to place it, melt from snow condensation. A leak near the roof, stone buildings collect moisture with quiet devotion. Winter nights freeze and thaw the edges of everything. A drop falls again, steady, patient, mildly insulting. The keep itself seems to breathe. Timber contracts in the cold and gives a small creak. Shutters press against their fastenings. A hanging cloth stirs, though no one nearby moves. You know it is only a draught. You also know that if you'd grown up here, surrounded by saints, charms, omens, and stories told under smoky rafters, you might not call it only a draught every time. Night gives ordinary things a second meaning. Medieval people lived in a world alive with signs. Dreams could matter. Sudden noises could invite interpretation. Illness, weather, animals, candles, and accidents might be read for meaning, though not everyone agreed on what they meant. Learned clergy often warned against superstition, yet charms, blessings, protective words, and folk practices persisted because human beings do not abandon comfort just because someone educated frowns at it, especially not at midnight in a building that keeps making noises. The surviving sources leave room for caution about how deeply different people believed in ghosts, omens, or household spirits on a night like this. Sermons condemn certain practices. Legal records occasionally reveal fears. Literature delights in marvels, and everyday silence hides most private thoughts. Some historians emphasize the enchanted texture of medieval life, while others remind us that people could be practical, skeptical, and humorous about strange claims. Here in the dark hall, both possibilities feel close. You can laugh at a superstition in daylight and still pull your blanket higher when the chain clinks by itself. A man sleeping near the lower benches snores, stops, snorts awake, mutters something, and settles again. Another sleeper answers with a sigh. Someone turns over under a cloak. Straw rustles inside a pallet. The dogs twitch in dreams, paws moving as if chasing rabbits through a warmer country. One lets out a muffled bark, then looks embarrassed without waking. You pass a servant lying on a narrow bedding roll near the wall. His shoes are tucked beneath his head, not as comfort, surely, but as security near him. A young page sleeps sitting half upright against a chest, mouth open, his attempt at dignity defeated. A cloak has been thrown over him by someone kinder than he probably deserves. He will wake stiff, confused, and still expected to move quickly. At the far end, a few household members remain awake in whispers. Night does that. It draws out things not said in daylight. A worry about a sick child, a question about stores, a rumour from the road, a memory of someone who did not survive a past winter. Their voices are too low for you to catch fully, and perhaps that is right. Not every past must become your possession. Some history is best heard as murmur. A gust strikes the shutters, the wood rattles hard, and several sleepers stir. One dog raises its head, decides the enemy is weather, and lies down again. Weather, after all, cannot be bitten in any satisfying way. You stand near the centre of the hall and turn slowly, by ember light. The great room has lost its daylight certainty. The high table is only a darker shape. The benches are ribs, the rafters are sky. The rushes smell of crushed herbs and old feet. The air is warm near the fire, cold near the doors, and smoky everywhere, as if the evening meal has become a ghost of itself. There are stories, of course, about castles haunted by former lords, betrayed ladies, murdered guests, restless monks, and invisible dogs. Many of those tales grew in later centuries, polished by tourism, politics, and the delicious human need to make old stones dramatic. But medieval people had their own ghost stories too, often bound up with purgatory, unfinished penance, or warnings to the living. A returning spirit might not simply be entertainment. It might be a request for prayer. Imagine being woken by a ghost that wants administrative follow-up. Very medieval, very inconvenient. But tonight, the sounds remain ordinary. Mice in rushes, breath in sleep, chain in wind, ember in ash, water finding gravity. The keep is not dead stone. It is a body at rest, full of hidden motions. Every person inside trusts, or hopes, that walls, watchmen, saints, servants, locks, stores, fire, and habit will hold until morning. Your own tiredness begins to deepen. It arrives slowly, not as a command, but as a thickening at the edges of thought. The remedies room, the children's games, the women's stitches, the chapel candles, the battlement frost, the kitchen heat, the Lord's bed curtains, the smoky supper, the guarded gate, all of it folds together. The night has carried you through the keep layer by layer, and now it asks less of you. A final coal collapses. The glow softens. Someone near the wall whispers a prayer into their blanket. Barely audible. The cat reappears with nothing in its mouth and the expression of one who refuses questions. Beyond the hall, another passage leads toward the sleeping spaces, where blankets, bed curtains, shared warmth, nightclothes, chamber pots, and the wonderfully unromantic details of medieval comfort wait in the dark. You move toward the sleeping spaces, and the hall loosens behind you into emberlight and breathing. It is strange how a room can remain full of people and yet feel abandoned by the day. The benches, the high table, the rushes, the dogs, the folded cloaks, all have softened into shapes rather than objects. The keep no longer performs itself for supper, prayer, work, or rank. It settles into the more honest business of getting through the cold until morning. A servant leads you along a passage with a small lamp. The flame is shielded, but still it trembles. Light touches the stone wall, then slips away. Your footsteps sound too loud, so you shorten them. Somewhere behind a hanging. Someone coughs once, then turns over. Somewhere ahead, a door opens with a quiet scrape. The whole building seems to ask for gentleness now. Even the hinges are trying not to gossip. Sleep in a medieval keep is not one simple arrangement. Rank follows people into the dark as faithfully as a hunting dog. The lord and high-status family members may have bedchambers with enclosed beds, curtains, better mattresses, bolsters, sheets, coverlets, and servants nearby. Guests are placed according to importance and available space. Pages, attendants, household servants, guards, workers, and children sleep wherever custom, duty, and warmth allow in chambers, halls, lofts, corners, service rooms, or near fires that are never quite warm enough for everyone. You pass a doorway where several bedding rolls have been laid side by side, straw mattresses, wool blankets, cloaks. Perhaps a rough linen sheet for the luckier sleeper. The room smells of rushes, old smoke, damp cloth, and human fatigue. Not unpleasant, exactly, but close, very close. Medieval sleep is rarely a private little island. It is more often a shore where many tired bodies wash up together. A young servant kneels to adjust a pallet near the wall. She shakes out a blanket, checks for crumbs or worse, and folds one edge inward. The gesture is quick but careful. Bedding matters. A lumpy straw mattress can still be a mercy if it lifts you from the cold floor. Straw may need changing, beating, airing, and defending from pests. Wool keeps warmth even when slightly damp, though no one here would call dampness a feature. Linen sheets, when present, are valued. Clean linen is comfort. Status and discipline all in one. The lamp moves farther in, and you see a curtained bed in a better chamber beyond. It stands raised on a frame, its hangings drawn partway closed. Inside those curtains, breath and body heat will gather. The curtains block draughts and eyes, both of which are very persistent in this century. A thick coverlet lies across the bed, perhaps with fur or wool layered beneath. Pillows and bolsters create a slope for sleeping more upright than many modern people prefer. The medieval bed is not necessarily a flat cloud. It is an arranged nest, a defended pocket of warmth. People of means often slept in linen shifts or shirts rather than the fitted nightwear you may picture today. Others might sleep in undergarments, tunics, or whatever combination of dry, warm, and socially acceptable could be managed. Nightcaps, coifs, or head coverings help retain heat. Hair is braided, wrapped, or tucked away. The body is prepared not for beauty sleep, that modern fantasy, but for survival sleep, the kind where toes must be negotiated with before they freeze into tiny complaints. There is a basin near one wall and a cloth folded beside it. Washing before bed may happen according to rank, water supply, temperature, and willingness to endure cold hands. Wealthier chambers may have ewers and basins for washing hands and face. While servants handle the carrying and emptying, full bathing exists in medieval life more than the lazy old myth suggests, with bathhouses in towns and private bathing among elites when circumstances allow, but tonight, in a frosty keep. No one is cheerfully filling a porcelain tub with lavender foam. A little warmed water for important hands is already an achievement. And then, because history refuses to remain romantic for more than 6 breaths, you notice the chamber pot. There it waits, practical, necessary, and deeply uninterested in your candlelit fantasies. Chamber pots are common household items for night use, especially when going outside or down cold passages would be miserable or unsafe. They may be ceramic, metal, or wooden in some settings. Depending on wealth and use, someone will have to empty and clean them. Someone always has to deal with the part of history that paintings politely crop out. A small detail from material culture makes the scene even more human. Some surviving medieval and early modern pots and vessels carry jokes, inscriptions, or crude humour. Because bodily functions have apparently united humanity across time with astonishing consistency. Not every pot in this keep is decorated, certainly, but the idea that people could laugh around such necessities should not surprise you. When life is cold, crowded, and full of smells, humour becomes not optional but medicinal. The records do not always let us know exactly who slept where on any given night inside a particular keep, and arrangements could change with season, guests, repairs, illness, childbirth, or travel. Architectural historians, household historians, and archaeologists often have to combine room layouts, inventories, accounts, wear patterns, and comparison sites to make careful guesses. A chamber listed as private might still be crossed by servants. A hall used for ceremony might also host sleepers after benches were shifted. The medieval house is flexible because it has to be. A servant checks the shutters. They are closed tight, but wind still finds the seams. A strip of cloth has been pushed into one gap. It flutters faintly. There is no perfect seal against winter. Comfort here is made of small resistances. A hanging over the wall, a rug or rushes underfoot, curtains around the bed, a warmed stone perhaps, if one is available, a shared blanket, a door closed quickly, a candle pinched before it wastes itself. You're offered a place to sleep, not grand, but good enough to make your tired body grateful. A pallet near the inner wall, away from the worst draught. A wool blanket with a faint smell of smoke and lanolin. A rolled cloak for your head. You kneel and press one hand to the bedding. It is not soft in the luxurious sense. It has ridges, straw stems, and the memory of other sleepers. But it is off the bare floor, close enough to stored warmth, and covered. Suddenly that feels like kindness. Nearby, someone climbs into a shared bed with the careful irritation of people trying not to wake one another and failing mildly. The bed ropes creak, a voice whispers, "Move over." Another voice mutters something that sounds ancient and universal. Shared sleeping is normal in many households, not necessarily intimate in the modern sense, but practical. Beds are expensive, rooms are cold, and bodies produce heat. Privacy loses arguments to February all the time. A child is tucked under a blanket in the corner. One foot immediately escapes. An older hand pushes its back ear. The foot escapes again. The battle will continue until morning near the doorway. A servant removes shoes but keeps them close. Another wraps a cloak tightly around the shoulders before lying down. The air is cooler near the floor than you hoped. You pull the blanket high and begin to understand the medieval love of layers, not as fashion but as engineering. The lamp is lowered, shadows rise, a final candle remains for a moment near the door, illuminating the room in warm brown fragments, a hanging cloth, a chest, a bowl, folded garments, bare toes, a sleeping dog that somehow obtained a better position than several humans. Then the candle is snuffed. A thread of smoke curls upward, sharp and brief. Darkness settles with weight, but not emptiness. Breath surrounds you, a cough from the passage, a floorboard's complaint, the faint clink of something metal far away. Your body continues to remember the road, the gate, the yard, the hall, the food, the chapel, the wall, the remedies, the murmuring women, the children, the mice. All of it folds beneath the blanket with you. The bed is not perfect, the room is not silent, the air is not fresh, and yet, as warmth gathers slowly under wool, as your hands thaw against your chest, as the keep holds back the night with stone, habit, and sleeping bodies, comfort arrives in its medieval form imperfect, smoky, shared, and deeply welcome. Beyond the shutter, frost thickens in the dark. Inside, you close your eyes, and the keep breathes are around you until the first pale signs of dawn begin their quiet journey toward the walls. The first sign of dawn is not light, not quite. It is a thinning of darkness, a softer shade behind the shutter, a feeling that the night has begun loosening its fingers from the keep. You lie still beneath the wool blanket, warm only because you have worked at being warm all night without admitting it. Your knees are tucked, your hands are close to your chest. The straw beneath you has shaped itself into a landscape of ridges and complaints. But you have made peace with it, mostly. Around you, the room remains heavy with sleep. Someone breathes in a slow, whistling rhythm. Someone else mutters once and falls quiet again. A dog scratches, turns in a circle, and settles with the confidence of a creature who has never paid rent, tithe, or feudal due in its life. The air smells of wool, smoke, old rushes, and the faint stale scent of many bodies having survived together until morning. Then, from somewhere below, comes the first deliberate sound, a servant moving. A door opens carefully, but the latch still clicks. Feet cross stone, ash is stirred in a hearth. The sound is soft, dry, almost like paper being crumpled. Someone is coaxing yesterday's fire back into usefulness. This is how morning begins in a winter keep, not with birdsong and golden curtains, but with ash, breath, and a person who had to rise before almost everyone else. Fire preservation matters. Embers may be banked overnight under ash to make morning rekindling easier, and in households where flame fails, someone must strike sparks from flint and steel or borrow fire from another hearth. A medieval household depends on flame as much as food. It cooks, warms, lights, dries, protects, and gathers people into community. Without it, the keep becomes a very expensive stone refrigerator. You hear gentle scraping as a shovel moves coals. A breath blows carefully, a pause, another breath, then the smallest crackle, fire returning. It is not dramatic, but it feels intimate, almost tender. The keep is waking from its centre outward. The shutter nearest you has a pale edge now. Frost feathers the inside seams, delicate and cruel, in the weak light. You can see your breath once, maybe twice, before the room warms by a degree so modest that only a medieval person would celebrate it. You flex your toes, they respond with suspicion. Fair enough. They have had a difficult night. Nearby, the child whose foot kept escaping the blanket has managed, somehow, to lose the fight entirely. One bare foot sticks out into the cold air. An older hand appears from beneath another cover and pushes it back without opening any visible eye. This small rescue may not enter the chronicles. It should. The room begins to stir in uneven stages. The people with duties rise first, because history has never been equally fond of sleep. Servants roll from pallets, wrap cloaks around shoulders, feel for shoes, and discover whether the shoes remained where they were left. A young page wakes with a start and looks terrified for no obvious reason, which suggests either a dream or the sudden memory of responsibility. He smooths his hair, fails, and hurries toward the door. In the hall, benches will be shifted, rushes may be raked or refreshed if necessary. Dogs will be removed from places they were never officially allowed to occupy. The kitchen fires will need building up. Water must be fetched, grain prepared, ale checked, bread cut, animals fed. The wool watch relieved, gates inspected, messages carried, the whole keep, which seemed almost dreamlike in the night, returns to its practical self with very little romance and a great many cold hands. Outside, frost lies over the ward. When you step into the passage and follow the morning movement, the stones breathe chill through your shoes. The yard beyond the doorway has turned pale silver. Cartwheels are rimmed white. The stable roof glitters. A bucket left too near the wall has a skin of ice on top, and someone breaks it with a wooden handle. The sound is sharp in the morning air. The horses shift and stamp, sending steam from their nostrils. A groom speaks to them in a low voice, already carrying hay. The hens, deeply offended by existence, begin to complain from their cage, somewhere near the refuse heap. The foxes left delicate tracks in the snow, proof that the night had visitors even when the watch found nothing worth raising alarm over. The dog who barked at it last night sniffs the tracks with intense professional interest, as if preparing a report no one requested. Morning in a medieval castle is not leisurely. In many elite households, the day is structured by prayer, meals, labour, administration, and the routines of service. People rise according to role. The Lord's household must be fed, dressed, warmed, informed, and prepared for whatever business the day brings. From managing estate matters to receiving visitors or riding out, a castle looks permanent from a distance, but daily life inside it is a continuous act of maintenance. The chapel bell sounds faintly. A few figures move toward prayer wrapped in cloaks, faces pale with sleep. Their footsteps leave dark marks in frost. The chapel candles will be lit again, perhaps with beeswax if the household can afford the dignity of it. The saints will receive morning petitions after having listened through the night. Very patient. Saints, excellent customer service, assuming one does not mind delayed answers. The question of how strictly every household followed devotional routines at dawn is not easy to settle. Rules, ideals, and written expectations often survive more clearly than ordinary behaviour. Some residents may have been devout and punctual, others may have prayed while half asleep, or arrived late, or thought privately about breakfast. The sources do not give us every yawn. Still, the rhythm of prayer marks the day, even when human bodies perform it imperfectly. You stand near the edge of the yard and look back at the keep in daylight. It seems less mysterious, but no less powerful. The walls show cracks, stains, patches, and frost. Smoke rises from the roofline in blue-grey ribbons. The gatehouse, so stern in the night, is busy now with guards stamping feet and checking fittings. A servant carries ashes away. Another brings in water. A clerk, already awake and probably chilly, crosses toward a chamber with tablets or papers tucked under his arm. The world of records, meals, repairs, and orders begins again. The great hall smells of last night when you pass through it: smoke, ale, rushes, and sleep. But morning is working on it. A servant opens a shutter briefly and lets in a thin blade of cold light that makes everyone nearby regret transparency as a concept. The floor is being tidied. A dog is encouraged to move and pretends not to understand. A child retrieves the half-ruined wooden kingdom from beneath the bench and studies the damage with the solemnity of a defeated prince. Bread appears again. Ale is poured. Perhaps there is leftover pottage warmed from the previous evening, or fresh grains beginning to simmer. Breakfast may be simple, especially before work begins fully. The body does not demand grandeur, it demands heat, calories, and the reassurance that another day has started. You feel the night behind you now, not as fear, but as memory. The road to the gate, the muddy ward, the hall fire, salt on the tongue, tallow smoke, the high chamber with its bed curtains, the kitchens roaring below, the watchman listening over snow, the chapel beeswax, the women's thread, children whispering mischief, bitter herbs for winter aches, mice in the rushes, the shared warmth of sleep. All of it remains inside the keep as dawn softens the edges of stone. Nothing has become easy. The cold has not surrendered. The work has not ended. The hierarchy has not dissolved into a sentimental morning glow. But the night has passed, and in this world that is no small blessing, now the light grows slowly over the outer wall, touching frost until it shines, then melts into droplets. The keep wakes, not peacefully exactly, but faithfully. It does again what it did yesterday and what it must do tomorrow: shelter, feed, order, warm, and remember, you draw your cloak close, take one more breath of smoke and winter air, and let the morning carry you gently onward. The frost on the stones begins to soften. The smoke lifts straighter as the wind calms. Somewhere, a spoon stirs a pot with slow, circular patience, and that small sound becomes the whole world for a moment. You don't need to hurry now. The night has done what it came to do. It wrapped the keep in cold, tested every wall and shutter, pressed at every blanket, whispered down every stair, and still, somehow, the people within endured. You may let your thoughts grow slower. The gate is no longer a dark mouth in the snow. It is only a gate. The watchman is relieved. The candles are stubs. The hall is pale with morning, and the dogs have gone back to pretending they are useful. The children blink into the day. The servants move with tired grace. The Lord's chamber warms by degrees behind its curtains. The chapel holds its quiet flame. And you, who came in from the frozen road, can rest in the knowledge that history is not only made of battles, crowns, and dates carved sharply into stone. It is also made of bowls held in cold hands, patched sleeves, banked embers, whispered prayers, hidden crumbs, shared blankets, and someone rising before dawn to bring the fire back. So let the keep fade now. Let the walls grow softer in your mind, less stone than shadow, less fortress than shelter. Let the snow outside become only a pale hush. Let the footsteps in the passage drift farther away. Let the last candle flame lean, flicker, and steady itself one final time. You are warm enough. You're covered. The morning has arrived without needing anything more from you. Breathe in slowly and imagine the faint scent of smoke leaving your cloak. Breathe out and let the cold road fall behind you. The medieval keep remains where it is, high and quiet in the winter light, holding its stories in the stone, while you drift beyond the gate, beyond the snow, beyond the need to listen closely. The fires are tended, the doors are closed, the beds are emptying, but your own rest can deepen. Let the old world settle into silence, gentle as ash over embers, soft as wool drawn under the chin, calm as dawn touching frost on a wall. Sweet dreams,